Welcome to Her Media Diary, the podcast where African women share their stories, bold moves, and behind the scene moments that shaped their journeys. I am your host, Dr. Yemisi Akimobola. And with each episode, we're pulling back the curtain on what it really means to build a career in media, to break barriers, and stay true to your voice. Whether you're starting out or already making waves, this space is definitely for you. Today's episode is part of our Women in Corporate Communications series, and I'm happy to be joined by a dynamic storyteller and strategic thinker who has built an incredible legacy at the intersection of media, branding, and advocacy. Fatima Jones. Fatima is a powerhouse in the world of cultural communications with a career spanning over 2 decades in public relations and corporate communications. She currently serves as Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at the Dance Theatre in Harlem, one of the world's most iconic institutions. In this conversation, we'll talk about her earlier life, the role of Black women in corporate communications, and how we can make these spaces more inclusive, not just in theory, but also in practice. So stay with us. Fatima, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Please correct me at any point if I mispronounce your name.
I like the
Is it
way you
Fatima
say it. I
Fatima?
like the way you
Okay,
say
all
it.
right.
It's
Okay.
my name was given to me by my father. I was named by my father. I'm going to say his name out loud, Stephen Jones. He was a Southern man that ended up moving to Harlem and eventually joined Malcolm X's mosque and became a Muslim. And my name is the daughter of Muhammad in the Quran. It's a very special name that is pronounced in different ways by different people from different cultures. And so I pronounce it Fatima, but I also, for many years let people call me Fatima because in America, that's how people use the I. They pronounce the I as a E. But it's a special name no matter what. So I appreciate you even asking the question.
Well, thank you so much, Fatima. You describe yourself, talking about names and special names, you describe yourself as a cultural doula
Mhm.
and chief amplifier,
Mhm.
which both very beautifully poetic. So can you take us back to Harlem and Brooklyn and the young Fatima? What was it like growing up and how did that shape your kind of journey to becoming a communicator?
Yeah. I would say that I was probably inspired to go into the cultural arts world by first, the rise of music. I feel like the 80s and 90s had the best music out of all generations, in my opinion. You got Michael Jackson, Prince, all of the hip hop rising. Like I was inspired by all of the amazing creativity happening in New York in the 80s and 90s, watching, the dance shows, Soul Train and things like that, Solid Gold, all the old school, like, this is when you could see music videos on television and see performances on TV. All of the young Black people rising up and performing and showing how great our culture is. So I would say that's probably my first inspiration was seeing on television these amazing performers, and I very much connected to music, and immediately started kind of singing in elementary school and joining the chorus in high school. At the same time, my father had been working for an organization called the New York State Council on the Arts, and that's an organization that grants money through the state to arts organizations around New York State, which is one of the biggest states in the U.S. And I would go with him to different shows. I actually saw Dance Theatre of Harlem at the age of 11, and was immediately captured. So it's not lost on me spiritually how I got here in this space, literally in the studios, working with this company now. And between his influence, all of the things happening in New York at the time, I just at one point in high school decided that I wanted to work in an industry that continues to source me, right? That I could be proud about, that gave me joy, that brought joy. And so I decided to stay working in the arts. I had my first internship at a museum and had never heard of communications. Like they didn't that back then. They didn't tell you what PR was. You didn't know that communications was a field. You know you just didn't know, right? So I got placed in a summer youth program, and to make a little money over the summer, and I got put in an office in the PR office at a museum. And I said, "Wow, I can write, I can talk to the artists, I can talk to the audience that's seeing things." It's a very creative, dynamic, lively field. And from there, every summer, I would try to get an internship in a communications or PR office to the point where senior year of college, I ended up working for this big concert series in New York called Central Park Summer Stage. And I got to work on their first hip hop concert with Tribe Called Quest. And I was just
Wow,
like,
really?
listen,
Oh
this
my
is
God.
it.
Oh my
This
God.
is it. I don't want to do nothing else but this. And that's where it began. And I always tell young people that it's easy to get a job when you have shown that you have interned, that you know how to show up on time, you understand what it's like to work in an office or whatever in the field. And it wasn't hard for me to get a job once I graduated from college.
I want to go back to kind of those early years because clearly your father seemed to be quite an influence on you.
Yeah.
What was it? Tell us about your growing up. And you mentioned Malcolm X earlier on, all of those things. Tell me all of those early.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I don't get a chance to talk about this much, so I appreciate being able to do that. My parents have roots in the South of America, so where a lot of enslaved Africans were placed and put to work in the South. So our roots are there. And both my parents moved to New York at very young ages. My father moved to New York at 16. My mom similarly around the same age, and they both started working very young, very entrepreneurial spirits. My father actually ended up owning a small bodega, what they call here a small store, and he joined the mosque and he worked for a museum called the Studio Museum up in Harlem. And he just did a lot and met my mom, and they both joined the mosque, and they were both very pro black. What I would call, I'm a black power baby. I came out of the Black is Beautiful generation, where you supported black businesses, we supported black things, and we felt very strongly in supporting our culture. So it's not a surprise that I ended up working in spaces that were black led and primarily centered black artists. It's very kind of it's common to my family and what we do.
Yeah.
Both very creative people. We centered art and music and dance and writing and literature very squarely in our family. My parents didn't stay together, but I ended up kind of going back and forth between his house and her house, and there was lots of music. Um, Lots of parties and gatherings. I lived across the street from a park, and it wasn't until I became an adult that I realized what a blessing that was to
Mhm.
be in the city, but also have this huge, like this nature park right across, literally across the street, our window saw across the street to Prospect Park. So I think all of those things kind of seeped into who I am now. I still enjoy all of those things, and they still are part of what I think is part of a well lived life, which is something outside of yourself, right? You have your own personal pursuits, but then what are you doing for other people, and how are you contributing to society? How are you trying to bring joy and calm and
Mm,
peace to people? And
mm,
also, how, when sometimes do you have to agitate a little bit, right, to get
yeah.
change? When is it time for us to come together? When is it time for you to be alone? When is it time for you to have allies so that we can make change in whatever situation that we're in? All of that
Mhm.
stuff came from my upbringing and all of those pockets of experience.
And you described your role as amplifying Black culture, as you just said. So I would love to hear your journey in that. Like, that comes with
Oh
challenges,
yeah.
that comes with successes,
Hmm.
that comes with speaking up when perhaps you don't feel able to or you can't for some reason.
Yes.
What does that mean in practice for you?
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny. I was talking to my daughter about this yesterday. I
Mm.
want to say that I'm lucky. I'm not sure if I'm lucky, but both of my parents were people who spoke their minds. And so, when you see something, it allows you to understand it, right? So it's hard to do what you can't see, right? So I saw them
Yeah.
speaking up in their places of work. I saw them speaking up in their community. I saw them speaking up in interpersonal communications. So when I got into the workplace, I kind of assumed that I should do the same. Like it didn't occur to
Yeah.
me that maybe I was either young or black or
Yeah.
maybe not a certain income level, and maybe that people didn't want to hear what I had to say. It didn't occur to me. Like that's the kind of confidence I had going in, right? And I sure enough did get into the work world and found out that yeah, some people don't want to hear what I have to say. I found that out the hard way.
Yeah. Like a lot of us.
Like a lot of us, right? And over time, I realized one, either those places might not be for me, or perhaps I need to take another approach, or maybe I need an ally, or maybe it shouldn't come from me and maybe I can, have somebody do something in my proxy, right? It took some time to realize what spaces require which approach. And through the years, my I would say 2 jobs ago, I ended up getting recruited for probably one of the most famous music theaters in the world, and it's called the Apollo. They call it the world famous Apollo. It's where James Brown and the Supremes and all of the tremendous American celebrities, the Temptations, all of the Motown artists, they got their start. It's a black led organization. It centers black art. It's right in the center of the blackest part of Harlem. And I got there, and the first week, I had a meeting with the senior team. I was on the senior team, and all of the black women there had braids. And we were meeting and we were discussing kind of the strategic plan. And I just looked and I just said, "Oh my God, look at this." What? I was like, I can never leave this. I can't leave this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't
Absolutely.
ever, ever leave this. Where we just did the work. No one questioned how you looked or how you spoke or, any of the barriers that I had in jobs previously. It felt so, obviously we had it's a job, right? In any time you gather with people and work, there's always going to be some friction, things like that. And that's normal. But some of the other stuff wasn't happening. And to be honest with you, I just got really spoiled. So when I decided to leave the Apollo and came to Dance Theatre of Harlem, same thing, black led organization with roots in Harlem. It just made sense, and it feels very good to be here. It feels great to see the students, the young students, and we have dancers of all nationalities here. But I like to say that the organizations that I like to work for are places where I can speak my mind, that I can tell the truth, and that mirror the community that we are in. And there's some authenticity to that feels very good to me in my spirit. And I feel like I've earned the right to be able to stay in those spaces and speak truth to power when I'm there. So I feel really lucky to be able to do that.
We know how important it is to have diverse voices and perspectives from all genders in our story. And sometimes getting those voices, finding the right people, can be challenging. So that is why at African Women in Media, we have created Source Her, which is a platform designed by us to connect journalists and editors and content producers with female experts from across the continent of Africa. Whether you need a data scientist, health professional, engineer, aircraft expert, or someone who can bring fresh, innovative ideas to your story, Source Her absolutely has you covered. The platform boasts an extensive database of talented African women, making it easier than ever to find the right fit for your story. And it's not just about filling positions, it's about promoting diversity and inclusion in and through the media. Sign up now at sourceher.com to discover and interview female experts from across Africa. Together, let's promote adequate representation and inclusion of African women. Yeah. And when we go back to those early years, and I definitely want to talk about A Tribe
Mm.
Called Quest and all of those things. So, what was those early years, right?
Mhm.
Finding your feet, determining what industry you want to go into, discovering how to, get your voice heard.
Mhm.
Talk us through those early years of your career and
Mhm.
how you navigated it all.
Yeah, I mean, early years was lots of entry level communications jobs, working at a PR agency right out of college and learning what that meant. Really paying attention to how my superiors were working, having a really good work ethic. Because I had all those internships in high school and college, and because I had two parents that worked really hard, I understood what it was to say, like, if you're on time, you're late, right? I knew what it was to say, like, even if you're not in charge, listen so that you can learn, so that when you are in charge, you know what to do, right? I know what it's like to ask questions if you don't know, to not be afraid to take your boss out to lunch, to not to feel confident enough to ask for a promotion, or to ask, why didn't I get it, right? Or what could I do to be better, right? What are the things that I need to read, learn, see, to be a lifelong learner? All of those things help me to keep moving forward. And I would say the other thing that I learned very, very young, and I learned this from my father most of all, there isn't a job that I've had through the years where I can't call my former boss or former coworkers. The networking aspect was something that was very important, especially for a young Black woman, to have people who you can call on, right? And say, you know, I'm thinking about this opportunity. Do you know anyone there? Or, do you have any advice for me as I take this next step? So those early years looked like me really trying to just take hold of any opportunity that I could, but also enjoying life. Like, I had a time. This was when New York like had all the clubs. I was out going out at night and then waking up and going to work in the morning. And I had a small business as well. So, I'm 52 now, and I can look back at my time as a young person and say I didn't miss a thing. I didn't miss a thing. I even, in that PR agency I mentioned, that first job out of college, I actually got an opportunity to work in London for a couple of years. And that was because my boss at the time, saw my work ethic, and she said, "You know what? We're starting a London branch. I like the way you work. Would you like to come with me?" And I was like, "Hell yeah." This little girl from Brooklyn, I had never been to London before and had always dreamed of working abroad. And here, I didn't even ask for it, and here it is, right? And I believe that came from my work ethic, you know. Um, I don't know. Sometimes I speak to my daughter about this, but I think technology and the phones and all of that. I hate to sound old, but I think that that has stunted our work ethic.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a very thin theory, but
No, no, but I understand there's a lot of things that we had to do. You had to go out
yes.
and actually face people
That's
and
right.
talk to people,
That's
get
right.
face, that.
And there was a lot of extra work you had to do for stuff like in PR back in the days. Like now for your clients, right? You can just send them a link. You could say, "Oh, you were in the New York Times. Here's the link." Right? Back then, you had to get the paper, you had to cut it up and paste it on a piece of paper. Then you had to photocopy it. Then you had to fax it to them. You know what I mean? That there were multiple steps to things. Like, everything took 12 steps.
Yeah.
But that attention to detail is something that I'm very
Mm,
grateful for.
mm. And when you think, because you spoke earlier on about your parents' background and
Mhm.
where you grew up, etc., how would you say all of those things shaped both your work ethic, but then also your approach to corporate communication, your storytelling?
I would say huge, right? So first is to be clear and concise, right? I learned that from growing up with not the most means and somewhat of a tough neighborhood in Brooklyn, right? No one's got time to hear your sob story or hear you go on and on, right? So being clear and concise about who you are and what you have to say. And then I think, like, again, the strong work ethic. We come from people who work hard, who work for what they have. And, in the corporate communications world, I mean, it's all about like being able to talk about your story, right? Who are you? Who cares? Why should they care? And always, thinking about in every situation, who is your audience, right? Like, who am I speaking to? What are they interested in? Am I speaking just for just to hear myself talk, or am I what's the connection I'm trying to make here? A lot of that stuff, being confident enough to speak in front of a room and talk to strangers. I mean, so much of our work is cold calling and trying to win and convince people, right? People that maybe you don't know. All of that stuff came from my upbringing and the things that I've learned over the years. And when I think about corporate communications, you know, um, I always say it's really not that difficult. We sometimes make it difficult, but there are, a number of strategies that I still employ from even back in the day, that still work about being authentic and having a main message, um, knowing who your audience is. All of that stuff is the same stuff I learned, 30 years ago. I'm still using today.
Yeah, so there's some basic principles irrespective of whether
That's
you're
right.
using what technology or it's just on paper.
That's right. That's right.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. So a tribe called Quest. Tell us about that period. I'm so eager to
Oh
hear
man, I
that.
mean, it was a blip, but it was one of those change moments, right? Being able to work on the first hip hop concert at one of the largest outdoor festivals here in New York at the time. And just, from what one of the things that really brings me it helps remind me why I'm here is when I look out at the crowd, whether I worked at the Apollo or when I was at BAM or when I was at the museum and I would just walk through the galleries, or when I'm with Dance Theatre of Harlem and I'm on tour and I go into the theater and I just see the faces light up. And like to see all these young black kids watching this hip hop concert and seeing the energy go back and forth between the artist and the audience, that electricity is where I live. I'm right in the middle of that. That's what's bringing me the extra energy to, like, do that, press release, the post wrap up press release, because everybody else is asleep, but you're doing the post event recap, right? When everyone's asleep, you're out there sending it to the wires, right? That's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me going. But it was so, I mean, listen, the 90s in New York, I don't know what was better. I don't know what was better. You could just be on the street and run into Mos Def or Erica Badu or Common, and just like we would, it was just like, it was amazing. I'm not gonna lie. I feel very, very lucky to be alive and young at the time and literally see a genre bubble up and grow right in front of your eyes, super exciting times.
So corporate communication often has, like many industries, gatekeepers, right?
Hmm.
And access for women, especially Black women, has
Hmm.
not always been easy.
Hmm.
What barriers did you face personally, and how did you overcome them?
When I think about barriers, the first thing that comes to mind is my own personal barrier, like the barrier I put in front of myself, which sometimes looked like not reading the room and not being as strategic as I could be in the moment. Um, Maybe sometimes not taking advantage of a situation. Um, but there were definitely a few times when I was asked to be seen and not heard. Right, when I was asked to be the black face in the room just for show, but didn't want to hear my ideas, or when I was told that I was too angry, or the angry black woman, or oh, I've been too many stories to count of people misinterpreting things I've said, or reading my resting bitch face, as they would call it, being told that I was mean or people are scared of me, all that stuff. I've experienced all of it. And I'm not even sure how I got through it, to be honest with you. Someone said, like, how did you get through it? I think that I just had to believe in myself. I think that having other Black women leaders, Black women in your circle to talk to know that you're not crazy, that is not you, that is to call the thing a thing, it's racism and it's stereotypes that people try, tropes that people try to lean into and put you in a box, right? It's oftentimes people's their own lack of self confidence. When they see a self confident Black woman, it makes them feel a way, right? And it's your decision whether you want to play small or if you want to approach it from a different perspective. For me, how I approach it is I just got even more bodacious.
Absolutely.
I was like, "Oh, you think I'm bad now? Okay, what's tomorrow?" And to be honest with you, because I work in the arts, anytime I met the artists, they always connected to me. And so at the end of the day, my work spoke for itself. You may not like who I am, or you may not like how I look, or whatever it is, but my work outshone whatever you had to say. And I think that that's what got me through my sisters and my work ethic.
Yeah. And thinking about institutions and their branding and their own kind of how they portray themselves and your experience, both as an expert in the field, but then also as the experiences you shared, for organizations listening or people behind organizations listening right now, what advice would you give them in terms of really centering women's voices, right, in their branding, in their strategies, not just in a tokenistic, like you said, that black face in the room kind of situation, right? But meaningfully in a way that actually truly empowers women's voices.
Yeah, I mean, first I'll say that I have been working my last 10 years of employment have been under the great leadership of women. Um,
Mm,
and for that matter, women who are also mothers, who understand what it means to carry the load of family and work and your own personal pursuits all at the same time. Um, so I think in order to understand women, you have to talk to women, right? And I think anytime you want to talk about brand marketing or brand positioning, you have to again understand your audience, right? And if women are
mm,
important in your audience, you have to understand what they're looking for, what they want. And it's hard to do that without one talking to them, two having leadership that reflects that audience. So it
mm,
doesn't mean that every leader has to be a woman, but it does mean that you have to reflect your community. You have to reflect the audience that you're trying to serve. And that looks like in most cases having a diverse audience, having a diverse leadership and
yeah.
being honest about what they're looking for, right? I'm, it even goes down to like when I'm working on creative, right? When I'm choosing the main
Mm,
image for a project, who is going to gravitate towards it? I can't speak to everyone. Like I hope that we can, but that's not a realistic goal, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Who's the most viable audience? And oftentimes it's women. I mean, first of all, in the field, in the US at least, women make up a majority of the people in the communications field, or women
Mm,
leaders. Probably because maybe we're the most verbal. I don't know. Maybe because stereotypically we can manage a lot of things at once. I'm not
mm,
quite sure if that's even a real thing, but we know statistically women lead in this field. And for most of the organizations I've worked for, women have been the ticket buyers. They have been the ones purchasing and direct. If either they're bringing their girlfriends or their kids, or they're bringing their partners, they're the ones buying the ticket,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So those are the women. Those are the people I need to speak to, right? They're the
Mm,
ones,
mm,
pressing, buy.
yeah.
So what are they going to be interested in? And for me, that looks like I often use myself as a potential buyer because I actually am a person who buys a lot of tickets and goes to a lot of things. But then I also talk to people in my community, surveying, advisory councils, all of that stuff, getting feedback from the outside, because it's hard to make change when you're only talking to people within your organization.
Yeah. And you've mentored a lot of people. You've mentored people. What advice would you give to young Black women dreaming of leading communications
Mm.
um, at that global institution level as well? And perhaps thinking, what advice would I give young Fatima Jones as well?
Um, the advice I would give would be to never stop learning, never stop reading. I have a number of podcasts that I listen to
Mm,
every week. I'm always reading. I've got a stack of magazines. I still read magazines in print, the ones that do still publish. I like to
mm,
talk to people. I like to ask questions. I'm very be curious. Ask people about their backgrounds. Ask them how they got there. Like ask them what they're listening to. What you listening to?
mm,
Like in communications field, you have to have your finger on the pulse of what's going on. How are you going to do that if you're not actually out there, right? So I think I would say um, just get out there and live a full life that
mm,
includes continuing to learn. That's what I would say.
mm. And what are you excited about right now? What's happening with you right now? What are you looking forward to in the future?
Personally, I'm excited about getting my daughter into a great college. She's a rising senior, so a great college with a great scholarship.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you.
And then professionally, I have this idea of writing a book.
Oh,
Yeah,
brilliant.
so I'm thinking about, not thinking, I'm making a plan right now. I always say
Mm,
big plans require bite-sized steps, right? So right now I'm building out a
absolutely.
plan to get there. So that's what I'm excited about. I don't want to put too much
Mm,
pressure on myself, but I feel like between all of the things I've done in my career and some of my unique insights, I think it could be really
mm.
helpful for people in the field. So that's what I'm excited about.
Well, that's really important. I think documenting that experience and sharing it through a book is really important thing for all of us to be doing,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. There
So
aren't enough. There still aren't enough Black women voices out there, and our stories deserve to be told. There's room for all of us. We all have a unique position, you know.
and finally, thinking about all we've discussed today, and what's the one thing that you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
That's a delicious question. I love that question. One takeaway would be to, even if you can't find a job that taps that electricity I talked about earlier, find an extracurricular activity or find a hobby, find something that gives you that electric feeling, because at the
Mm,
end of the day, your work ethic is going to feed off of how you feel inside. And if you can find the joy, like even if it's just music or dance or whatever it is, whether it's reading, using your hands to create something, find something that will be a grounding place for you that could bring you that electricity. And I
mm.
feel that that will make you have a better, fuller life.
Thank you so much, Fatima, for joining me today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yamasi.
So that was the remarkable Fatima Jones, reminding us that representation in corporate communication isn't just about ticking boxes. It's about shifting culture, taking fuller stories, and making room for authenticity at every level of leadership. Fatima's career and vision shows us that women, especially Black women, are not only occupying high level communications roles, but they are redefining what leadership looks like and sounds like from the inside out. Thank you for listening to Her Media Diary podcast. If you found today's conversation inspiring, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with somebody who needs to hear it. And if you'd like to join me on an episode of the podcast, drop me an email at yemisi@africanwomeninmedia.com and visit our website, hermediadiary.com, to listen to other episodes on the podcast. Subscribe on your favorite platforms and tune in via our radio partners across Africa. And don't forget to join the conversation using the hashtag HerMediaDiary. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep amplifying the stories that matter.